into the Iran crisis, calling for the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened, and what this all means for the world economy, the coming Trump-Xi summit, and the fragile ceasefire hanging over the Middle East. Stay with me, because this story touches everything. Before we talk diplomacy, let's talk geography, because you cannot understand this crisis without understanding this waterway. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran to the north and Oman and the UAE to the south. It is the only sea passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, and through it passes roughly 17 to 20% of the world's total oil supply. That's approximately 21 million barrels of crude oil every single day. Countries like Japan, South Korea, India, and especially China depend on this strait for the vast majority of their energy imports. When the Strait of Hormuz is healthy, the global economy breathes. When the Strait of Hormuz is choked, the global economy suffocates. Now here's where things get serious. Since the outbreak of the Iran war, which we'll get to in a moment, the Strait of Hormuz has been largely impassable. Both Iran and the United States have imposed blockades. Iran on one side, the U.S. Navy on the other, and caught in the middle? Oil tankers, cargo ships, and the entire global energy market. China alone was importing 1.38 million barrels of crude oil per day from Iran in 2025. That's roughly 12% of China's total crude oil imports, flowing directly through this now blocked strait. So when Beijing says reopen the strait as soon as possible, trust me, that is not just diplomacy talking. That is economics screaming. To understand today's meeting in Beijing, we need to rewind and understand the conflict that started all of this. Earlier this year, the United States and Israel launched what were described as wide-ranging strikes against Iran. The reasons cited by Washington and Tel Aviv ranged from Iran's nuclear program to its support for regional proxy forces. The strikes were massive in scale and fundamentally changed the strategic landscape of the Middle East. Iran, for its part, responded, and what began as targeted strikes escalated into a full-blown conflict that drew in regional players, disrupted global oil markets, and sent shockwaves through every major economy on Earth. Now here's a critical turning point. In April, just weeks ago, a ceasefire was brokered. And this is where the story gets really interesting because it wasn't brokered by the United Nations. It wasn't brokered by the European Union. It was brokered by Pakistan, with both the United States and Iran crediting Beijing with securing their acceptance of that deal. Let that sink in. China, not a traditional Western mediator, helped pull two warring sides back from the brink. But the ceasefire is fragile, the strait is still blocked, and the world is holding its breath. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi sat down in Beijing with his Iranian counterpart, Abbas Araghchi. This was Araghchi's first visit to China since the war began. And the symbolism of that cannot be overstated. When a foreign minister makes his first wartime visit to a major power, he is not just exchanging pleasantries. He is signaling alignment. He is seeking support. He is negotiating survival. So what exactly did Wang Yi say? Let's break it down point by point. First, he called achieving a lasting ceasefire an urgent priority. He said it was important to persist with negotiations and that Beijing was ready to help de-escalate tensions. Second, and this is the headline, he called for the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened as soon as possible, saying the international community shared a common concern over restoring safe and normal navigation through the waterway. Third, Wang Yi took a clear swipe at the United States, echoing Beijing's earlier position that the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports was, quote, irresponsible and dangerous, and that it undermined the already fragile ceasefire agreement. And fourth, Wang Yi said China appreciated Iran's commitment not to develop nuclear weapons. This was Beijing essentially vouching for Iran's word on one of the most sensitive issues in international security. Iran's response? Araghchi told Wang that cooperation between China and Iran would only grow stronger. That is diplomatic language, but the message is unmistakable. Tehran is leaning into Beijing. It sees China as its most powerful backer on the world stage right now. Now let's zoom out, because China's role in this crisis is layered, calculated, and frankly, fascinating from a geopolitical standpoint. On the surface, Beijing presents itself as a neutral mediator. It has repeatedly called for dialogue. It helped broker the April ceasefire. It speaks the language of peace and stability. But underneath that, China has enormous economic skin in the game. China is Iran's single largest trading partner and its most important oil customer. In 2025, China imported 1.38 million barrels of Iranian crude oil every single day, all of it sanctioned by the United States. Beijing has essentially been keeping Iran's oil economy alive despite U.S. sanctions, which tells you everything about where China's real interests lie. But here's the balancing act Beijing is performing. China also needs the Strait of Hormuz open, not just for Iranian oil, but for oil from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iraq. A closed strait hurts China just as much as it hurts anyone else, arguably more. So China finds itself in this unique position. It's sympathetic to Iran. It's critical of U.S. military action in the region. But it also desperately needs the waterway that the U.S. Navy currently controls to be open for business. This is why Wang Yi's language today was so carefully chosen. He didn't openly attack Washington. He didn't threaten anything. He simply said the international community, everyone, wants this strait reopened. And he's not wrong. Meanwhile, Trump this week said Xi has been very respectful and that China has not challenged the U.S., adding that Xi wouldn't challenge him because of me. Whether that confidence is well placed remains to be seen. But it tells us Trump believes he still holds leverage over Beijing, even as China quietly maneuvers itself into the role of the region's most important power broker. 1 week from today, if everything goes according to plan, Donald Trump will fly to China for a summit with Xi Jinping. If it happens, it would be the first visit to China by an American president in nearly 10 years. The meeting was originally scheduled for March, but it was postponed after the U.S. and Israel launched their strikes on Iran. Think about that timeline. The war derailed the summit. Now the war is what the summit will be about. On the agenda, almost certainly, the Iran war, the ceasefire, and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. These are not separate issues. They are one interconnected crisis that sits at the heart of U.S.-China relations right now. Trump has to walk a tightrope. He wants the strait open. His own economy needs oil prices stable. His allies in Europe and Asia need the waterway functioning. But he also doesn't want to be seen as backing down in the face of Iranian or Chinese pressure. Xi, on the other hand, wants the strait open, wants the ceasefire to hold, and wants to cement China's image as a responsible global power, a reliable mediator that the world turns to in crisis. The irony is striking. Two leaders who have spent years in economic and strategic competition with each other now find themselves needing each other to solve the same crisis. A war neither of them started, in a region neither of them controls, over a waterway both of them depend on. Whether Trump and Xi can find common ground next week could literally determine the stability of global oil markets for months to come. Let's bring this home. Why should you care about a diplomatic meeting in Beijing between two foreign ministers? Because the Strait of Hormuz being closed doesn't just affect oil companies and governments. It affects the price you pay for fuel. It affects the cost of goods shipped across the world. It affects the heating bill in your home next winter. Global energy markets are interconnected, and a blocked strait is a tax on every single person on the planet. The longer the strait remains impassable, the higher energy prices climb worldwide. And the longer this ceasefire remains fragile and unresolved, the greater the risk of the conflict reigniting, with consequences that would dwarf what we've already seen. China's push today is not just about Chinese interests. It represents the anxiety of every oil-importing nation on Earth that is watching this situation and praying for a resolution. The coming week is critical. Watch the Trump-Xi summit closely. Watch whether the U.S. naval posture in the Persian Gulf shifts. Watch whether Iran makes any gestures toward reopening the strait from its side. Every signal will matter. The world's most important waterway is blocked. The world's two most powerful nations are meeting next week to try to figure out what comes next. And China, quietly, carefully, is positioning itself as the indispensable middle power that both sides need to reach a deal. Whether Wang Yi's call today for the Strait to be reopened as soon as possible translates into real action depends on diplomatic moves that will unfold over the next 7 days. This is one of those moments where history is being made in real time, in meeting rooms in Beijing, in corridors at the White House, and on the still waters of the Persian Gulf. I'll be covering every development right here. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit subscribe, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share this with someone who needs to understand what's really going on in the world right now. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.